Welcome to the Self-Healing Revolution, where ancient wisdom and modern science meet. I'm your host, Paige Pierman, owner of Love Yourself, an Ayurveda and integrative wellness center based in Louisville, Kentucky. It is my desire during this summit that you will learn about three things: to biohack your body, master your mind, and elevate your soul. It has taken me over a decade to heal my own life, and I have learned through this process to work with many enlightened individuals who are on the path to healing. And I'm so excited to share with you today Dr. Melissa Carver. I met her at a rejuvenation retreat that she was hosting in Kentucky. And I was very impressed with her and her husband, who's also an Ayurvedic practitioner. Dr. Melissa Carver is the author of Who the Hell Told You That?, founder of the Annual Rejuvenation Retreat, president of the nonprofit organization Mindset Junkies, contributing writer for Chopra and the Elephant Journal, as well as a Chopra Certified Instructor. You can catch her as a regular on ABC 36 high at noon. She's a mindset practitioner who feels authentic perspectives generate happiness and fulfillment in all aspects of life. Welcome for joining me, Dr. Carver. I'm so excited that you decided to be on the summit.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited too. I love all of those topics.
Yes, yeah. So like I mentioned, I had originally met you as part of your rejuvenation wellness retreat. Would you like to just tell people why you started that and what was your impetus for having a rejuvenation retreat?
Well, why I started it was a few different things, but one, as you mentioned, I'm a Chopra instructor. And at the time I had traveled a lot to go to the Chopra Center retreats, and they do those, all over the globe. And I was like, I really want people in Kentucky to be able to experience this without having to travel so far. When we think about those retreats, I think our mind automatically goes to these quote unquote exotic locations. But I also believe Kentucky has that aspect as well for people who aren't from here. They come here and they are just blown away by the beauty. And so often we forget that and think that we have to go outside of Kentucky to experience that. So that's really why I started it. And we do have a lot of people that come here and join us at that retreat that are not from Kentucky. So I think it's working.
Yeah. Well, I was honored to be there and got a taste of you and just live experience as a speaker, and was just, when you're around somebody who carries the light within, you can see that light shine out and have an impact on others. So tell me, how did you get into mindfulness and where did this all begin for you?
Really as a child, but I didn't know it at the time. When I was a teenager, I just kind of thought everyone thinks like this. Everyone processes their thoughts this way. Everyone manifests what they want. But no, it turns out that's not normal at all. So the more I started actually talking to people about it and realized that no matter where I was, you could put me anywhere. People come to me and they want to tell me about their life and they wanted my help. And that was even with elders. I mean, as a teenager, elders were coming to me asking for my opinion. And sometimes that was really odd for me because, we're taught and programmed that it's supposed to be the other way around. But once I accepted that and understood that they knew what they knew and I knew what I knew, then I was okay with it and I became more comfortable. And I was like, I probably should be doing this, full time. I think this is who I am. This is my dharma.
Right. So your dharma is to help others in healing, but in specifically mindfulness, right? Am I correct in saying that?
All things really mindfulness, but really specifically deprogramming.
Yes, let's get into that.
Yes.
I want to hear all about what is deprogram. What does that mean?
Deprogram and unlearn all those things that we were told that are not serving us. Probably never did serve a whole lot of people. Maybe it did serve a few, but we were just pounded these ideas into our mind that our elders, once again, told us based on their fear, their programming. Things were just handed down over and over again, whether they worked or not. It was just set in stone. This is how it is. This is how you do this. This is how you approach life. These are the things you talk about. Do not talk about. Don't tell anyone that you're not thinking clearly. They'll think you're crazy, right? Don't tell anyone you have any sort of mental illness or the possibility of a mental illness, things like that. We're getting better as a society, but there's
Mhm.
still a lot of work to be done for sure.
Right. I think there's been historically a lot of shame, and people are finally starting to say it's okay to say, I'm not okay, or
Mhm.
it's okay to have a midlife crisis. It's okay to pivot into being a whole new person.
Right.
Right. So when you wrote the book, Who the Hell Told You That? Like, was it basically the impetus to help people feel comfortable in examining their own belief systems? Where do you feel like is the heart and core of the teaching of that book, to help them feel safe and secure in that process? Or what
Yes,
is it?
stepping into their own authenticity and not going along with the stamps that were branded on our ass as soon as we were born. People
Mhm,
tell you automatically who you are based upon who they are.
mhm,
Bam, you're Christian. Bam, you're Muslim. You are this, whatever. You can put anything in that blank,
mhm.
and you are Democrat, you're Republican, right? It's just whatever your parents or grandparents are, that's what they automatically label you as, tell you that's who you're supposed to be, and often get upset when you question those things. So people stopped questioning because they wanted those around them to love them and accept them, but that damages them and who they are. And then they can't step into their true purpose for being here on this planet.
I so resonate with that. Like you, from a very young age, I was very spiritual, and my belief systems are the things that I was told to believe didn't sound accurate for me.
Mhm.
It was like, this doesn't resonate with me. And so when I was really young, I was very woo woo in the sense that I finally, like, it took me until my 30s and early 40s, like I'm turning 45 this month, to finally be like, I'm woo woo and I embrace it, and all things woo woo are my jam. And it literally, like, I hid my light for most of my early adult life for fear of what people would think of me if I really
Mhm.
shared, my belief systems, or at least like the value. I don't want to say if it's values, but just what I believe to be true about reality. Um,
And
so
questioning things, right? Because so
yeah.
often when you are more spiritual than
Mhm,
following the rules, you have a lot of questions. And so often people don't like that because they
mhm.
they feel that you're attacking them, and it's not about attacking them at all.
And it can be threatening too. I think a lot of people dim their light because of fear of how that may make others feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
If you embrace who you are, but that might make people feel really uncomfortable if your value system is quite different from theirs. And so there's, I think, a lot of keeping programming in place just to be accepted by the tribe, if you
Right,
will.
right. When in all reality, we need to just be who we are and allow that to attract our tribe instead of
Mhm.
trying to fit a square into a circle.
It's pretty much, yeah, and it doesn't work very well.
No, not at all. No.
Right. So with the deprogramming, how do you lead others into the process of deprogramming the mind?
Well, I start by if I'm doing it individual, there's a lot of various ways, I do public speaking and that sort of thing. But if I'm seeing my private clients, we start with how they were raised and what feels right and what doesn't feel right and what they've always wanted to kind of go against but did not, or they felt like so often people feel like something's wrong with them. If they're
Mm,
surrounded by people who think one way and they think the other, or are at least questioning that thought process, they feel like something's wrong with them for not going along with that. So
mm,
we start there and then we move through the rest of the thought processes in their life and how that's not serving their life. And at one point, thoughts can, and actions, of course, can serve us. If you're in survival mode you need a completely different thought process than when you get out of that survival mode.
So
So
true.
you become accustomed to doing things a certain way, and it did work. It worked. It got you through it. But then when you don't need that anymore, it's time to let it go.
Yeah, I had this person when I was going through my own healing journey talk about the archetype of the soldier. Like our ego can have this soldier, like our ego serves to protect us, but it also can keep us from growth. And so he helped me see that, look at my ego as a soldier and say, like, you've been here all this time to protect me, but really I don't need you anymore. I'm okay if I'm okay if you move on so that I can be in my authentic self. It's like giving myself permission to say, this did serve me at one point and it was okay. And it was there to protect me, but I'm okay now venturing out into the unknown,
Mm-hmm. I
And I
call mine a dragon. And then now I'm like, okay, the dragon is on the leash, but I know that it's always there and I can release that leash at any point if I need to.
right. So what do you think it is that brings people to the process of questioning their belief systems? When you work with people, do you find trends that they're ready for this journey, or they're ready to look at their belief systems and step into a new reality?
I think they start realizing that they fulfilled and checked off all the boxes of what they thought success was, but they're still not happy. Something is still off. Something is wrong. What is it?
Yeah.
What's going on? It's either that, or it's they have continuously tried and tried and tried to get to that quote unquote success, whatever that was to them. And that also isn't working. So what's holding them back? It's in some fashion trying to get to a next level. And no matter what they do, it's just not happening for them. That's
Right.
probably that's the number one reason why people come to me.
Yeah, it's like when I get married, when I get that job, when I go on that vacation, when I retire, when I own this business, when I write my first book, it's always like something that you're grasping for. And then like when people finally access all those things, when they get the car, when they get the marriage, when they get their kids in school, and then they're still grasping and they still haven't found their inner happiness, because if I'm correct in your thinking, then they haven't done that inner journey, which is going inside and asking all those deeper questions.
Exactly. And speaking of programming, so often that starts when we are little kids. They start asking us in kindergarten, what do you want to be when you grow up? Kindergarten. Grasp that. Just think on that for just a moment.
Like you're supposed to even know. You haven't even played with your toys yet, and you're already supposed to have an idea.
Like, I have no idea what. And there's
and even college. Like I know kids say they get to their fourth year in college and they're supposed to be studying what they are supposed to do with the rest of their lives, and they get to the fourth year and they're like, I don't even know what I'm going to.
No idea. Yeah.
Because they haven't even been out in the real world yet to even feel into what that even feels like. It should almost be the reverse, like go and experience like life and then decide what you want to study. Like go apprentice somewhere, go be in the energy of what you think you might want to do. And then maybe you will, or maybe you won't.
Yes, I have always said that instead of pushing these children into college. I mean, some people truly know. Some do. Some, a fraction of people truly know what they want to do at that point, but majority do not. And instead of pushing them into college, encourage them to travel, experience, do, be, like you said, go apprentice somewhere, volunteer, experience all the things that you can, that you have interest in, and see which ones are really, truly for you and which ones you just kind of sort of like. We can have so many various interests, but that doesn't mean that's where we're supposed to be. And I also feel like so often people go into things that they think is going to, again, fill that success box, whatever that is. That money amount is usually the number one reason why they choose, right? I'm going to go into the medical field. I hear this all the time. I'm going to go into the medical field because it's good money and it will always be needed. That's not a reason to go into a medical field.
Yeah.
You're going to end up miserable. The money will come. You can create the money. You can create your own career that maybe you've never even heard of before and structure it your way. And I don't think these children are taught that enough.
There was a book that I read by Dr. Vishen, or I said not Dr. Vishen Lakhiani, with the Mind Valley, the Code of the Extraordinary Mind. And he really starts the book with questioning your belief systems. And he, coined the term unfuckwithable. And what that was is when you truly become unfuckwithable, you can embrace all parts of your being and not worry what other people think about that. Then you have the power to become whoever you need to be. But until you become unfuckwithable, it means that all of those belief systems in the stew outside of yourself don't matter anymore. And you can truly authentically step into who you are. And when you do, you have all the power behind you to launch yourself into that new reality, because you're it's like that fearlessness.
Because you know yourself, you know your soul, you know who you are, and you don't need anyone else to validate that.
Right.
No one else.
I think that most people go into sometimes 20, 30, 40-year careers and not full. What I liked about that book is that you'd rank, is your job a 10? Because if it's from a scale of 1 to 10, if it's not, then is it aligned? And I think for most people, they don't think about their life that way. Does my job feel like a 10? Is my spirituality a 10? Is my health and wellness a 10? And there's no reason it should be a 3 or 4. There's no reason that we should settle for less than what we desire. Right.
But again, back to that programming, parents and grandparents taught people your job isn't supposed to be fun. Your job isn't supposed to be enjoyable. It's work. It's work for a reason, right? You work hard and you'll make it, or you work hard and then you take the time off. You enjoy that week vacation that you get per year. No, that's just, that's horrible. But that's what most people think, especially I think in America. I mean, living here in Kentucky, we have a lot of factories, a lot.
Yeah, we do.
And my mom worked in a factory for her whole life. The last factory she worked in was for 15 years, but she literally worked in a factory her entire life. And she would always say things like, well, it's a good job. Mom, no, it's not. It's not a good job. You make decent money when you work overtime because you're getting those overtime hours, but you've worked 60 or 80 hours a week to get there. That's not a good job. Your body hurts. You're on an assembly line. Nothing about that is good. But that is what she truly believed. And I think once she retired and took a step back, and I would say that to her because she would still say that. It was a good job. I didn't like it, but it was a good job. I would say these things and she would think, okay, yeah, you might be right. Yeah. But they move into these areas because they know people are broke. They know people are programmed in those ways, right? And they take advantage of that. There's probably some great factories to work at. Don't get me wrong. This isn't a bash on every factory. I'm sure there are ones that treat their employees well, and they don't have to work 80 hours a week to pay their bills.
But it's that concept of you're giving your life force day in and day out, and that's your life force. That's your energy. And then, it's people work their whole lives to live a life and then they retire. One of the things that used to dawn on me is my ex-husband had a wealth management firm, and people would work and they'd save all their money. And then as soon as their loved one would retire, one of the spouses would die and they never get to live the dream. They never got to actually go on that vacation or spend a day on the beach, holding each other's hands, because they were spending all those years to work towards something. And then the minute it was attainable, the life force was gone.
Right.
And like, I think the biggest fear, right, is that when you question these belief systems, that it can rock your whole world. It
Mhm.
can deconstruct your whole reality. And then it's like, well, because wouldn't you think when people go through this process, then everything comes into question?
Right. Absolutely. Yes. Once you start unlocking that and you welcome free thinking, authentic thinking, your own brain to figure things out without the little voices of everyone else around you your entire life, yes, then you start questioning everything. And people do start to float away. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. You're not going to have the same friend circle that you did previously. More than
Mhm.
likely, there's some that are going to be there forever, for life. There's the lifers, but we weren't meant to have those people in our life if they aren't attracted to who we authentically are anyway. It's all
Right.
fake. So you
Mhm.
have to question that too. Well, if I shift over to who I really truly am, and this person doesn't want to talk to me or be around me anymore, they never really liked you for who you were in the first place. They only liked that facade that you gave them.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so huge. I mean, I've gone through this process. I think anyone who goes into the mindfulness world or into meditation, spirituality, yoga, retreats, everything comes into question when you begin to go down this path, and it can rock your world. But I think the beauty of what you're doing is you have a process to hold people's hand a bit, because if there wasn't somebody there speaking about this, there might be many people that would abandon ship and just go right back to those programs.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So tell me, like, give, if it's okay, if you feel comfortable, like a story of how this changed somebody, right? When they deprogrammed to, I call it deprogram to reprogram, but you might have another way of saying it. Like, how did things shift? Because I think what you said is then you can follow your dharma, your life purpose, right?
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, there's so many stories. One that is coming to mind is one of my private clients really was hung up on the word retirement.
Mm,
She just couldn't move past how this word was holding her back. And it was getting closer and closer to what should be her retirement age, right? So, of course, we're all told, oh, you're supposed to retire at 65. That's what
mhm,
we hear.
mhm,
Um, and that really scares the shit out of a lot of people for
mhm.
several reasons. Well, if I retire, then am I going to have enough money? If I retire, what am I going to do with my life? Because they have poured their heart and soul into this career for the most part.
Mhm.
Um, so she was just completely terrified of this word. So we switched it around and she no longer uses the word retirement. It's not even in her vocabulary anymore.
So using
You
some
are,
conscious language, yeah.
yes, you're just going to move forward and continue to live life how you want to live life. You can leave this job or not leave this job. If you do leave this job, it doesn't mean you can't have another job. And she does actually have her own small business that right now she does on the side while she moves toward leaving this other company, but we do not use the word retirement.
I like
Um,
that.
I think going back to what you were saying, how people save for that their entire life. And so often the life force does leave them also because now they feel like they don't have their what they got up for every morning.
Purpose, yeah, that purpose it was a purpose, but it wasn't their own.
Right. Right. But they made it their own.
Mhm,
They made it their own. Whether they enjoyed it or not, they still felt maybe needed, or they attached themselves to a label,
mhm,
maybe their title, whatever. If they were a supervisor, a manager, a CEO, things like that, that title becomes who they are more than who they actually are. Um, that is also one of the top reasons for suicide when people get
mhm,
fired from a certain title or they
mm,
can no longer add that to their name. It completely devastates them because that's who they invested their entire identity in. So yeah, just that word, getting rid of that. And I think sometimes that's one of the main things for a lot of people. It's just one little word and what that means to them. It's the definition of it. So
Right.
if we flip what that means to us, it don't have to mean that to anyone else. But retirement to this person can now mean just continuing in a new fashion. She's going to continue to work. She will never probably stop working. I mean, ever. She loves it. We don't have to stop work. We as humans like to do things. We like to be physical. We like to create. So, yeah, that's one
Was
story.
thinking about the richness of conscious language, though. Like, so I was talking to my partner. I was like, "Oh, he has to go to work." I said, "He has to go to work today, or he has to," and he goes, "I don't have to. I choose to." And I think it's like reframing sometimes our language around what we're doing so that it matches our reality. Like,
Absolutely.
it's so, and that was like really, it was like, oh, and I was like, yeah, I love that he changed it from have to choose to, because it was a conscious choice. Because I think what you're alluding to is a lot of times we have a victim consciousness that we have no control of our reality. If we have to do something, it's outside of our conscious choice that we're stepping into. That's what we want to do. It's like things are happening to us versus happening for us, or,
Right.
where this is happening, but I'm just going along for the ride.
Right. Absolutely. Yes,
Versus,
we do have control. And yes, we have bills to pay. We live on a planet that is not free anymore. So we do need to pay our bills if we want to have the conveniences that we have. But we still have a choice. We could still be homeless if we chose to be. We could still go live in a tent if we chose to be. Most of us don't choose that life. That's not what we want. We want a house. We want a vehicle. We want electricity. We want running water. So that's another way that we can flip that mentality as well. I think a lot of people get stuck in bitterness of the world that society has created. And yes, things could be better. And I do believe that a lot of us are working on it being better. But right now, it can still be great for us as individuals.
There's a movie that I saw years ago called The Minimalist, and it was huge for me because we've been told, like you were saying, that we have to, like, we have these ideas that we have to have the car and we have to have the big house and the white picket fence. And, so people buy these big homes in suburbia, and maybe they do it because they choose to, but some of them, it may be because that's what the tribe is doing. And in the minimalist, he literally sold, I don't know if you've seen the documentary, but he sold all of his belongings and lived in a tiny apartment, and found that the less that he had, the more free time he had. And it was like a big aha moment for me, because it was like, sometimes there's a lot of freedom in letting go of a mindset or a tradition or a belief system that we're supposed to uphold a specific lifestyle. I mean, now you see people that live out of campers and, they're driving around in vans and living the van life. I mean, that didn't exist really. I mean, 5-10 years ago, maybe there were certain people doing, but there's like a whole community of people that are van lifers now, or like minimalist. And until somebody challenged that belief system, and then other people are like, wow, that person's like living with a lot of liberty and freedom because they don't have to pay a big mortgage, or they don't
see,
have.
that's the shift right there. That's the shift, because I do think those van lifers existed. But
They did.
I think
Somebody
more
had to do it
people
first.
were using words like loser, you know, and looking down on those people. And more of us are realizing that's freedom.
There's a lot of liberty and freedom when you aren't stuck brick and mortar to a place, and you can be anywhere. There are photographers that live their life on the road. There's people, bloggers, that live their life on the road. They all of a sudden stepped into the power that I choose to, not be stuck in one place for 20, 40 years, but it takes exactly what you're doing to say, like, who the hell told you that, to actually step into a whole nother reality of who you could possibly be.
Right. Yes, we have to question why we're not happy and then move in the direction that's going to create happiness. And we need to question what that word success means to us. Like you're saying, people buy these big houses and half the time it's not what they wanted. But in their mind, that was the stamp of success. That meant they had made it.
Mm-hmm. Living the dream is a quote. I mean, it's like language, living the dream. And one time my friend was at the grocery store and this guy said to her, "I'm living the dream." And she knew he wasn't. She said, "Are you living the dream or are you living a lie?" And he just like, you live in the dream or are you living a lie? And it is like, there was just this dead stop in his tracks, because she knew that he wasn't living authentically.
Exactly. But the American dream, that's what we were sold. And a lot of us bought it.
Hook, line, and sinker. And so, so like you in mindfulness, there's that part of deprogramming, and then what, right? What's the process? Like,
now, exactly like you said before, you unlearn and relearn, and you deprogram and you reprogram. So now you have to figure out who you are. What do you want? And what does that language now look like? What is your true, authentic voice inside of you? What is that saying to you? So we need to kind of turn up our intuition and listen to the internal self and the higher self more than we are listening to what society or maybe people around us are saying. Sometimes the two will align and sometimes they will not. So when they do not, now you have to have the courage to continue moving forward with your vision, even if everyone else is telling you it's the wrong way.
I'm 45, like I told you, and I was reading this book called Soulcraft, and it was talking about this idea of midlife. And from the perspective of the writer, he said it's probably not really a clinical midlife crisis. It's literally that the soul realizes that the life that you're living is not aligned, like you said, to your true self. And so that there's this, it's a crisis, but it's not a psychological problem. It's actually a solution to step into your authentic self. And when I read it, it was just so profound to think, oh my gosh, we've described a midlife crisis as something that's a problem or something to be, again, ashamed of, or, something that you should be ashamed of if you go through a midlife crisis. But maybe it's just, oh my gosh, you're realizing that you're halfway through possibly your lifetime. And that halfway through point means that you don't want to go the other half living the lie.
Exactly. And at that point too, a lot of people, their children are getting older. So they are listening to and hearing their own internal voice a little more. Humans love to distract themselves from their intuitive thoughts. That number one, hands down, that's their favorite thing to do. That's why everyone's on the phone all the time. The phone isn't the problem. People blame it on the phone. The phone's not the problem. The TV's not the problem. The problem is, even if there was no phone or TV, those same people would still find distractions in some way. They would create a problem, right? Or they create project after project after project. Oh, I need to, install all new windows in my house, when really they do not. When really they do not, right?
Right. How much unnecessary work do we cause ourselves for fear of feeling what we actually need to feel? And that, hold on, this rain came through and it got dark. Feeling that feeling. Hopefully it's not too bright. Feeling that feeling, and then feeling how scary it is. So finding something to do again to distract from how uncomfortable it feels to listen to yourself. Why is it so uncomfortable?
And that, I think, is what happens at that mark you're talking about, where a lot of people describe that as a midlife crisis, but it's really, like you're saying, it's not. You're realizing it's a lie, but that's why they're realizing it at that time period in their life. Now you're not going to as many soccer games or taking your children to all these different checkup and doctor appointments, etc. You don't have all of the distractions. Most people, not everybody, but a lot of people at that point have settled down in their job and their career. They feel like they know it pretty well at that point. So life slows down. These thoughts are now coming in, and it freaks them the hell out.
Mm-hmm.
They realize, wow, my priorities were maybe not how I really wanted them to be. Why am I doing this? Why am I still living this way? Why did I ever live that way? For a lot of people, I posted something, I don't know, on social media. It was, I don't even remember what the topic was, but something along the lines of, our thoughts and deprogramming, etc. And there was a hairstylist that commented, and she was talking about how often women were in her chair that wanted a specific haircut, but wouldn't get it because, quote unquote, my husband won't let me.
Yeah. I've had the same thing in my practice, people that have wanted to come and experience Ayurveda, do natural healing, and their partners are into conventional medicine. I had a call a week ago, a woman who was suffering, needlessly suffering. And she said, my husband won't let me. And I thought, oh my gosh, like you're needlessly suffering. Your intuition is calling you into doing another way of healing that's not conventional or traditional, right? What you're told you're supposed to do. And yet you can't even step into your own power because you're being told that that's not acceptable conventional medicine.
Right.
And then I thought, oh my God, but the problems that she's having within 30 days, we could overcome. Granted, she had some more serious conditions going on that would take a long time to address, but some of the need as she was suffering, I thought, oh my gosh, within 30 days, we could have quickly dealt with the heartburn and the sleepless nights, like just by shifting a few things. And yet she didn't feel like she had permission to just be who she needed to be or do what her intuition was calling her to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
A lot of,
and that's how many forms of programmed thinking is that right there, just in your statement alone. You have the person coming to you who is programmed that she's supposed to listen to and obey her partner, right? And then you have the partner who thinks there's only one path to healing. But I'm thankful that a lot of nurse practitioners and MDs are now understanding and expressing to their patients that it takes both.
I can't wait for the day to come where the conventional world embraces us as like holding hand in hand.
Yes, absolutely. And you need both.
Yeah. I'm not, when I talk about conventional medicine, I'm never I'm for it. It has its place, and natural healing, mindfulness, yoga, spirituality has its place.
If we make mind, body, soul a daily practice, then we won't need conventional medicine as often or as soon.
So you had a question before this, I was like, for this interview, how do you know when the authentic voice, the higher self, is speaking? How can you differentiate between the voice that's telling you what you can and cannot do, or what you should or should not do, versus the authentic voice? How do you distinguish between the two?
Yeah, that can be more difficult, and it takes really paying attention. But once you have grasped the difference, it's a lot easier. But at first, you really have to think, why am I thinking this? Where did this thought come from? Is this something that is outside of my normal thinking? If it is outside of your normal thinking, it probably is your intuition, right? Because the higher self loves to just drop those seeds in there to turn your course, to allow you to start questioning yourself and your thoughts and change your direction. Also, how often are you having this thought? And when does it come into your mind?
How often and when?
Yes. Is it at moments when you're trying to solve the problem? If it is, that's probably not your intuition either. In those moments when you're really trying to solve a problem, that's your logic mind working out and solving. But if you're just folding laundry or listening to music driving down the road, and this thought just overcomes you, and you're like, where did that come from? You weren't even thinking about it right then. That's more than likely your intuition.
Yeah, I think I asked this question because when people begin to want to step into the version of themselves that feels authentic, it's almost like the ego throws every reason as to why not to do something. All the reasons that won't work.
Right.
And then I think that people fall into sometimes a victim consciousness around, they know what their authentic self wants, but then they create all these hurdles around why they shouldn't or can't do that.
Right. They make it unrealistic or too expensive or too time consuming. Exactly. Like if you're out here driving and your intuition says to turn left, but the shortest distance to your destination is right, you're probably going to start saying, that's stupid. Why am I even thinking that? Gas is too expensive. Why would I take this long way? Where am I even going? Instead of questioning that, just follow it. And the more you follow it and you see the outcomes, you pay attention to what is being presented to you, then you start following it with no question. There's something great around the corner, or it's saving your life,
Yeah, that there's a lot of times that people have a gut feeling about something and they don't know why, but then later it's like, oh, I now understood why I didn't make that flight, or it's like the universe is like working on your behalf. And sometimes sometimes the universe puts up hurdles to work on your behalf and you can't see the forest from the trees of why, but then later you're like, oh, I now see exactly why that wasn't supposed to happen. Or
then it makes complete sense. Speaking of stories, I have so many with my intuition, but one of the stories of when I was a child, and this is how I really started grasping, this is who I was as a teenager. I was 15 and my friend had her license and we were supposed to go see Bone Thugs and Harmony. And I was so excited. We had waited months, had our tickets. And the day came for the concert and she called me and I said, I'm not going. You're going to be in an accident and I can't go. Please don't go. I tried to get her to stay at my house. But she became irate and thought I was just trying to back out for whatever reason. I don't know. So needless to say, she was pretty mad at me, but I did not give in. And this is another one of those, when your intuition is speaking to you to stand, you have to have the courage to stand that ground. She called me a few hours later and said, I'm glad you didn't go with me. This was back in the day, we had big box speakers in the back. Those box speakers, she was in an accident. They came through and they crushed the passenger side, which is where I would have been sitting. She was completely banged up, almost literally bit her tongue off. So at that point, she understood, what I was saying. I wish the outcome would have been different for her as well. But no matter how badly we think we want to do something, when that intuition speaks and tells us to sit down, we need to sit down.
Yeah, it's like hearing the whispers like come through, and sometimes they speak louder and louder, and then it's like, okay, if I'm feeling this, I should really listen.
Right.
So this summit, it's like 3 parts: master your mind. When you work with people, how do you help them? Like, again, there's the mastermind, there's like the part of where the ego, I keep using the word ego, kind of dictates our life, but then there's a part of us that's a truer self that we can step into, but there's this the master your mind is like where we're not allowing this ego to dictate it. Like these are like stories right from the outside, but there's also this part of us that doesn't allow I use the word ego. There could be other words that doesn't allow us to truly have control of our life. Again, it could be the stories, it could be, yeah, I mean, there's storylines that others tell us, and there's the stories that we claim and we create ourselves. But mastering your mind, like, how do you teach people to be able to be more directional in their lives, to have control over the mind?
Have control of their own thoughts.
Yeah, like mindfulness, like just how do you help people step into a mindfulness lifestyle?
Well, it needs to be, like I said before, a daily practice.
Mhm.
So often, once people have decided to come to someone like me, the shit has
Mhm.
totally hit the fan, right? There's a very big sign in their face that's like, you need to do this now.
Mhm.
And then we can work through, right? And they get to that point where they're happy again and they're starting to see things differently.
Mhm.
But then sometimes they slide right back into the old ways.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
it needs to be a daily practice. One
Mhm.
is, of course, meditation.
Mhm.
Two is journaling. And often when I say journaling, I think people mean like, oh, write your feelings.
Mhm.
Okay, that too, but that's not necessarily what I mean.
What do you mean by journaling in
I
your?
mean, writing down your thought patterns,
Mhm.
questioning why these things aren't working out that you have been trying to accomplish for so very long,
Mhm.
writing down different ways of thinking, researching, asking questions, finding mentors, writing down and journaling what they said. Let's just take that little clip right there as an example. If I find a mentor for something new that I want to do, let's say I want to open an Airbnb and I don't have an Airbnb and I don't know anything about it, right?
Right.
So
Mhm.
I find a mentor and I think I'm going to remember all the great things that they said because how could I forget them? They're so informative. No, you're not. You're not going to remember it all.
Mhm.
Write it down. But that doesn't have to necessarily be the mentor either. It could be the person that checked you out at Walmart. People all along our path say brilliant things all the time,
Mhm.
inspiring things. Write those down. Write down the things that inspired you every day.
Yeah. I
Making your
love it.
to-do list.
Yeah, I love what you said because as I always call it a growing edge in my practice, like what is the thing that you're bumping up against that you want to step into a new version of yourself, but it's a growing edge because you're not comfortable with that yet. So I'm always looking like for myself, what is my next growing edge? And and so I make it a point to look at the people that are professionals or they've mastered where I want to go. And then I say, what are they doing differently than what I'm doing?
Mhm.
And then if my part of me doesn't want to agree with them, I realize that that's part of me rubbing up against my growing edge. If they're saying something that I'm afraid to embody yet, it's because there's a part of me that's resisting the truth
Yes.
around
Yes.
that.
So often that is absolutely
Mhm.
the case. That reminds me of when I was learning with the Chopra Center.
Mhm.
Deepak said, there's no such thing as multitasking. And I looked at my husband and I'm like, okay, I usually agree with him, but
I don't agree with this.
he's full of shit. I, I was like, I do this and I do this and I do that. And I'm a mom and then, right.
Mhm.
And I just was not on board. I completely shut down. From that
Mhm.
point on, as he was continuing to talk about why it's not a thing, I wasn't listening at all. I didn't hear anything he said after that point. Just nope. And went into my own brain. And he was just not correct on that point for months. I still loved him. I still
Mhm.
thought, brilliant, of course. But probably 6, 9 months later, I was driving and I was like, oh my God, he was right. He was right. There is no such thing as multitasking. I'm the one that's full of shit.
Oh.
And what really made me realize that was I was having a phone conversation while doing something else. I don't remember what else I was doing,
Mhm.
but I got off the phone and realized I didn't hear 50% of what this person said
Mhm.
because I was continuing on with what I was doing. I got the important parts, but I didn't really have a conversation with this person. I also didn't really complete what I was doing with my hands either, whatever that was. No, it's not a thing. And you're right. When we think, especially when we think we're good at something and someone tells us, oh, you might want to question that, our ego doesn't like that.
Yeah.
Or we think we already have something figured out in the best way. Then we tell ourselves, well, that works for them. It's not going to work for me.
Mhm.
They don't know my life.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's true, right? But often we don't want to see it that way because we don't want to change. We also do
Mhm.
not like change.
Mhm. Yeah. And then the programming too, you definitely, the best way to see your programming is to have the mirror of a partner who mirrors back to you your own stuff. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, um, I always think about how I used to be so hard on my mom and like giving her such a hard time. And then I see myself do it with my own daughter. I'm like, this lesson has come full circle. Like I judged and then I thought I was a better person. And then I find myself in the same dynamic, rubbing up against the same lessons. And then it's like, it's come full circle and you have to really look at yourself when you see it in the light or the mirror of
Mm-hmm.
your own children coming back to you and questioning your belief systems that you thought you had it better or you had it more figured out. And then the lessons like right there in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a 29-year-old, a 16, and a 15-year-old. So the 29-year-old got a completely different mom than the 16 and the 15-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about that all the time. He completely recognizes that. He's like, you're a totally different person. I'm like, yeah, I'm glad, aren't you? Although I hate it for you. I
Yeah.
was still the person that I was a 16-year-old mom. So I definitely was programmed in my thinking of when they don't do what you say, you're supposed to whoop them.
Mm-hmm.
And being very, I don't know, I guess strict in the fact of if I say to do something, I expected him to like jump and do it, regardless of what was going on in his little world and his life.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you put that to the side now and do what I'm saying to do. I really took no consideration into the fact of, I mean, he's watching a movie or he's doing this or he's doing that. Why couldn't I just say things like, when you're finished, do this?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to matter if his room is clean now or 45 minutes from now? No, it's not.
Yeah,
It's
we
not
take
that
our own
serious.
programming of maybe how we were raised and then just do it. And then later, yeah, it's that same thing. Like y- you're looking, you're self-reflecting. Is this something that has to be this way or not? Like we
Mhm.
all get to create our reality, right? You're creating it in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. So my priorities are certainly different with
Mhm.
the two that are under my roof now than they were with my two oldest or my one oldest, sorry. But yeah, it's questioning those things and being okay with changing them. If it
Mhm.
doesn't feel right, it's probably not right.
Mhm. And with children too, like they're always shifting into a new era. Like every year they're a different child. And so as a parent, you're always having to question your old belief systems. Like my kids always give me a hard
Mhm.
time because I'm like, get your jammies on or it's Betty Bye. And they're like, Mom, like, we don't need to hear Betty Bye or jammies anymore. And I'm like, I did it for so long. I've programmed myself. And I'm like, yeah, but I've got a 13-year-old now. Like Betty Bye isn't hot. It's not working anymore. It's like I gotta reprogram myself, but we're having to constantly be different and show up differently because they're different. They're becoming more and more of adults or many adults, little adults, young adults.
Right. And it does happen fast. I mean, like you said, they can be completely in love with something and then boom, they don't even like it anymore.
Yeah. And just
So
like that, like we go, like, I mean, just as this whole conversation has been, and we're rounding up here at the end, but every time of life, like every 4 years, 5, 10 years, we're in a different stage of life. So why would what was working 3,
right.
4, 5 years ago have to be the same thing that's working now?
Yes, exactly. And that is why our grandparents and possibly parents' way of thinking of staying in a job your entire life has completely changed. And we can see that around us. Most people do not have that mindset anymore. Most people don't go into a job thinking, yep, this is it. This is where I'm going to be for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just
Yeah.
going to be here forever.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's such a gift to give people permission to begin to ask themselves why they believe what they believe. And I believe that they need a mentor or a guide, because when they step in that, it's really, truly unknown territory. I do think it's very
Mhm.
scary for some people to truly rock their worlds, and then they need a guide or a teacher to help them mindfully move through that.
And someone like my main process is really asking questions,
I
question
like that.
after question after question after question after question. And
Mhm.
they don't know what questions they should be asking themselves. Right.
Right.
But once they do go through this process, then they become aware of what questions to ask. And then you just continue asking those same questions over and over and over again, and full circle back to the journaling. And my book, that's what my book is, super thin. It's easy to read. You can read it in 2 to 5 minute increments. Hashtag Carline moms. That's I was someone who read in very few minutes.
Yeah.
And you have to have those little moments of time to yourself. But anyway, reading for 5 minutes and answering the questions that are in there. But then 6 months later, you can go back and
Mm.
answer those same questions. And you're going to have different answers because, like you said, you're a different person now.
Mhm.
So it's timeless.
It is timeless. And I love what you just said, because this curiosity is, when you come from a place of curiosity, you take the pressure off of having to know. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, you you just become curious. There's no right or wrong, there's no bad, good, indifferent. It's just a place of curiosity allows you to begin to be honest with yourself, to just begin to have that self-inquiry. Like, you don't you don't have to know it all right now.
No, I think it's a better place to not,
Yeah.
because then it's more fun and
Mm-hmm.
you are allowing yourself to be open to countless opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you can know the answer, but it might change 6 months from now, and be okay with that too. Be okay with knowing that you did know and it was solid, but now
Mm-hmm.
it's different. And I think that people get stuck in that too. Going back to the brands that, are stamped on their ass when they're born. Politics, I think, is where we see a lot of that. Someone chooses a person and that's their person. And no matter what, they're going to stick with that person because their ego has attached their decision to that.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're in it no matter what. Completely going down with the Titanic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that too. Like, if we could all come from a place of curiosity around someone's political beliefs, like, we might learn something. But if
Mhm.
we're attached to our own beliefs so strongly that we don't, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I've just been curious with people politically and learned something that I've learned their vantage point or their view from a different perspective because it's different from my own, and I only know my truth.
Right,
But when
right.
I hear their reasoning, I'm like, well, I can see why they would believe that if I lived in their shoes, or
Right.
I can't, then it opens up for compassion, understanding,
Yes.
willingness to hear something that's different from your own. But that's that curiosity too. It's like, you don't have to be 100% stuck in any way.
Right. Exactly. And how often is 100% the right way anyway? Because humans are complex.
Mhm.
I don't think there is, this is the way it is, period. This is the answer for everyone across the board. It's impossible because we have so much complexity to us as individuals and how we live our life and what happiness means to us. So there has to be different routes, right? There has to be different answers to get there. Um, my structure is not going to necessarily work for someone else's structure.
Mhm.
They might not even want to do that at all. But yeah, keeping that open to learn.
Mhm. I love that curiosity. Well, let's end with that. The just the asking the questions and being okay with being curious and then just going on that journey.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. So before we end, I'll just give you a brief moment if you want to tell our listeners about your annual retreat and where they can also find your book.
You can find all of the things on drmelissacarver.com. I'm also on all forms of social media. I do try to answer all DMs. Sometimes I don't get to all of them or they get lost in the sauce, but you can also send me a message on my website. And the Rejuvenation Retreat is every year, the last weekend of July.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to pause and then end this recording because it is not cooperating.